are formidable.
I've waited for this moment.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest from former unified bantamweight champion Dina Thorslund, who now claims to have a tentative date for her showdown with Shernika Johnson, which would crown a true undisputed champion at this weight, it being that while Shernika Johnson holds all the alphabet titles, she's not this division's lineal or Ring Magazine champion. That honor goes to Dina Thorslund. Dina was the holder of 2 world championship belts in the bantamweight division when she suddenly had to pause her career last year when she became pregnant and then had an involuntary miscarriage. These world champion belts are now held by Aussie Shernika Johnson, and Dina Thorslund would really like to change that, but the Aussie has been waiting for her, even though Dina has expressed several times that she was ready to fight, among other things, after her victory in Colding at the beginning of the year, when she said in the ring, "Shernika Johnson, I'm coming for you and my belts." She has subsequently used alternative methods to catch the Aussie's attention. I posted some provocative posts on Instagram because I got too impatient, she says. In posts written in English, it reads, among other things, "I can't wait until the day I take all of Shernika Johnson's titles. 2 of them have been given to her because of my pregnancy, but it's time for them to return to the real queen of the bantamweight division. But why do you think she's waited so long? She's waited so long because she knows it's going to be difficult for her," says Dina Thorslund. When TV Midwest last spoke to Dina Thorslund in early February, she said she was expecting a fight in May, but that's not going to happen, she says now. "I've been given a possible date, but it probably won't be until sometime during the summer holidays. I've been given a possible date, and that's what I'm working towards," says the Holsterboro boxer. She won't say when the date is, though. "Do you feel ready to fight?" "I'm so ready. I'm training hard, and I've added extra technical training, because if you only do what you usually do, you won't get better," says a confident Dina Thorslund. According to her, there is no doubt who will come out on top when the time comes. "I will," she says, and continues, "Otherwise, I wouldn't have spent so much time and energy on it. It would be the icing on the cake for my career. It would be a huge win," she says. The only boxer at or around these weights that could give Dina Thorslund a run for her money is probably Ellie Scottney, the newly minted undisputed super bantamweight champion where Dina once held the WBO title, all before moving down to bantam and becoming a unified champion there. Same thing applies to Shernika Johnson. She once reigned as IBF champion before being beaten by Ellie Scottney and subsequently moving down. Currently, she has all of the alphabet titles at this weight, but not the Ring Magazine and not lineal status. It's up to MVP to put this fight together. Dina Thorslund sports an unblemished record of 24 wins with no losses and no draws, 9 recorded knockouts. To Shernika Johnson, who sports a professional record of 19 wins with 2 losses and no draws, 8 recorded knockouts. Both fighters are 2 of the bigger punchers and more aggressive fighters anywhere at or around these weights, so a fight between them is sure to be fireworks. Shernika was last in action in December of last year when she beat a then unbeaten Amanda Gaye by way of a points decision over 10 rounds. In what was her second fight under the MVP banner. She fought 3 times last year, once in March, again in July, then again at the end in December, where Dina Thorslund saw action the following month in January of this year opposite the ring, Almudena Alvarez, who she decisioned over 10 rounds, snapping back that stint of inactivity, shaking off the cobwebs, and readying herself for the biggest fight of her career. The onus to put this fight together is on MVP since they promote both fighters, Shernika and Dina. Ideally, the fight would take place in neutral terrain since Dina is from Denmark and Shernika is actually from New Zealand but based out of Australia. Thus, neutral terrain would be the United Kingdom or the United States, either of the big boxing markets. In an ideal world, the fight between them What happened there? Now, I don't imagine that Shernika Johnson is all that crazy about having to fight Dina Thorsland. In the absence of Dina at bantamweight, Shernika has proven herself the most dominant fighter, so long as she's not around. But now that she's back, that designation is up for grabs, like all of those alphabet titles. I am leaning towards Dina to win the fight. Shernika Johnson, who when I first saw her was more of a boxer and a mover, has really leaned into pressure fighting, being aggressive and throwing combinations, overwhelming her opponents. That's how she's been looking as of late. But Dina Thorsland, she can do that and more. She can play the pressure fighter, just as, if not better, than Shernika, and when the situation calls for it, she can get on her toes, move around, work off the counter. She is one of the strongest punchers, if not the strongest puncher, in the bantamweight division. She has all the ingredients to match Shernika's efforts. If Shernika tries to play the pressure fighter, Dina has dealt with a good number of pressure fighters and made them pay for standing in front of her. Really is the very best fight to make in the bantamweight division and one of the best fights to make in all of women's boxing. And I am leaning towards Dina to win it. So let's see if MVP don't put this fight together. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, a recent PSA from Matchroom to the boxing media saying, behind the boxing media scenes, there is a shakeup. Matchroom have made a statement. Interviews outside of the allotted fight week media events are strictly not permitted. Unless you are invited by Matchroom Boxing, media should not visit fighter hotels during their fight week and will be asked to leave unless they're a guest staying at the resort. Any media who do not follow this will further risk gaining press accreditation to our events. Following the volume of media now attending events, this has now given fans a pass to get into events under the guise of being journalists, just so they can meet their favorite boxers. Matchroom isn't happy with the dress code either, emphasizing that it's not professional, and thus they are tightening up security and the general etiquette for how interviews are done for what are their shows, and I think that they're right to do it. Let me say that I'm not the guy whose bread and butter is sitting down with boxers and asking them questions. I don't actually rely on them for content. There are better suited individuals for that assignment than I am. So I'm not gatekeeping the space for fear that some young go-getter is going to take my spot. I'm acknowledging that there are better people for that assignment than I am, and it should be left to them. The problem is, there are so many kids now trying to break into the boxing media space, you could question if they really even are media, or are they just fans with a camera, fans with a budding YouTube channel. But still, just fans. Gaining accreditation behind the guise of journalists when they're not journalists. So perhaps they're content creators, not journalists. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also no shortage of content creators in the space right now where there's only so many members of the media you need to cover an event, like there are only so many questions you have to ask a fighter. Only so many people to do it before it becomes monotonous, before everybody's regurgitating the same content. The space is oversaturated. As Boxing Beats and Rhymes pointed out in what was his video, he's right. I agree with him. You don't need that many people to cover a show, and the people that are there covering it should already have sizable followings. We're talking about big channels to get an event exposure, because that's what it's all about. It's not for every Joe Blow starting up a YouTube channel. Isn't that going to make it harder for newcomers to break into the space? Yes, but it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be difficult. Boxing Beats and Rhymes also pointed out that a couple of years ago, this wouldn't have even been a conversation, and those covering the sport would have been actual journalists and real members of the media, not newcomers. This isn't amateur hour. There needs to be quality control, because there are only so many people you need to cover an event, and there really are only so many questions you can ask before it becomes repetitive. Takes away from the decorum that any Joe Blow can show up with his iPhone and his little microphone and start taking up the fighters' time. If that sounds elitist, it's because it's supposed to. Everything is not for everybody. In this modern day and age where everybody wants a participation trophy and inclusivity is all the rage, inclusivity, for the sake of inclusivity, has never been the harbinger of excellence. of quality. And that's what this is. Quality control. Some assignments are better left to other people because everything ain't for everybody. There are people out there, they have a genuine knack for this, like Marcos Villegas, Michelle Joy Phelps, Radio Raheem, Coogan Cassius, Charlie Parsons, Bob Tebbett. Those people are very good at what they do, good enough that we don't need everybody else to do it, to try to fill the same role that they're already filling. There's only enough space to go around. There are only so many questions that need to be asked before it all turns into a clown show. Bunch of wannabes eager to rub elbows with their favorite boxers, buttering them up. It's nauseating to where what passes for a member of the media these days is tantamount to another arm of promotion, a boxer's street team. That's not the role that members of the media are intended to fill. They are intended to be impartial chroniclers, observers, chronicling the sport, not trying to make buddy-buddy with Joe Boxer. What kind of media event is it when the would-be media are lapping it up and laughing it up with the boxers, taking selfies in their jeans and sneakers? Takes away from the decorum, allowing all these unserious people into what is a serious event, a serious space where serious business is done. Yeah, I applaud Matchroom for tightening up security and who gains access, and when they do, how they behave themselves when they're there. It's appropriate. The amount of money it takes to do a card, the time and effort to put it all together so that a bunch of novices can cosplay journos to ask the same line of questions everybody else already asked. Enough is enough.
I'm curious, what do you think of their product so far and everything that they're doing? There's some big changes that could come about. In fact, they were testifying in the Senate today. Oscar was there as well about this Muhammad Ali Revival Act that they're calling, about the changes and whatnot. What do you think about everything Zuffa has done over the past few months?
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that there in the Supreme Court. And, big shout out to Oscar De La Hoya. He's really out there advocating for our fighters. That Muhammad Ali Act is in place for a good reason. If the boxers, they don't know that act and what it protects, I suggest that you do your research and see what it protects. Because once that is taken away, it's going to be free game, and not everybody's going to be getting, it's not going to be fair no more. You know what I mean? So what I do have to say about Zuffa is that they've been putting on some good fights, some great fights, actually. I don't really mind the fights that they've been putting it on. But I don't give them too much heat because at the end of the day, the fighters that they have, they probably didn't, not all of the fighters, but some of the fighters didn't have opportunity to fight for a belt or to even get any fights in PBC, DAZN, or, any other company. If a new promotion company comes and gives fighters opportunities for them to feed their family, I have no problem with that. But, but this changing of the Muhammad Ali Act, it's very concerning. But, at the end of the day, to each their own. That's why every fighter has to have their own personal lawyer. Every fighter has to look at the contracts and all that stuff. So you guys need to be educated when you guys go out there and sign the contracts.
You could just tell from David's response that everything he thinks is going on and he thinks he understands about the Revival Act is second-hand information because he hasn't actually read through the literature himself, and why would he? He's the boxer. His job is boxing, not legislation. The Ali Act isn't going anywhere. What is it that these people don't understand? The existing framework isn't being replaced. If you still want to box for alphabet titles, if you still want to be promoted by a Matchroom or a Top Rank or a Golden Boy, a boxer or a Queensbury, you still can. Assuming they would have you. Because the existing framework isn't going anywhere. They're just adding to it. And what so many people within the industry are afraid of is the luxury of choice. Because now the fighters have a choice, where they didn't have one before. They got one now. And what the people in the industry are afraid of is that the fighters won't choose them. Some might choose Zuffa. Sick and tired of being given the runaround by the WBC and the WBA, their chicanery. Sick and tired of the dubious business practices from at least some of these promoters. They might go to Zuffa. He shouted out Oscar for fighting for the boxers. That's not what Oscar's fighting for. The irony of Oscar De La Hoya being the would-be champion for this cause, protecting the boxers, when so many of the boxers say Oscar screwed them over. How many of his own fighters have taken him to court? How many of his fellow boxers have accused him of skimming money off the top? Stealing. Canelo accused him of it, Ryan. And those are just the guys in more recent years. If you go back even further, anyone from Juan Manuel Marquez to Shane Mosley to Sergey Kovalev to Gennady Golovkin, they've all accused Oscar of skimming money off the top, and this is the guy supposed to be defending the boxers, looking out for the boxers. What he's looking out for is his ulterior motives. It's not that he wants to stop Zuffa from screwing over the boxers, it's that he reserves the right to be the one that screws them over. You think he got that reputation for no reason? That many people all saying the same thing about the same guy. All of which is a matter of public record if you haven't already seen it yourself. Don't wait until you have an argument with me to start doing the legwork, because all that means is you shouldn't be talking about this. Because you didn't do the research. Too many in the boxing space debating about the evils of the Revival Act didn't actually bother to read it to evaluate its pros and cons. It's a lengthy read, and reading, for these people that are arguing, that's not their strong suit, so I don't expect them to do the legwork. They argue with their pride and with their feelings, not with the facts, and the fact of the matter is, the formation of UBOs... Well, just one, really. ...is not replacing the existing framework or robbing fighters of choice. They're not obligated to go sign to Zuffa. If you're weary of Dana White and his business practices and their semblance to UFC's structure, simply don't sign to them. Take your chances with the existing framework that's worked so well. Because you seem to be under the impression that fighters are going to start getting jerked if the Revival Act is passed, when fighters have been getting jerked long before we got here. And it seems like you didn't give a damn until Dana White came into it. So many examples that I can cite off the top of my head, being a content creator, one who chronicles the sport for a living, that if you just now, all of a sudden, started caring about fighters getting screwed, you must have been living under a rock. Either that or you're virtue signaling that you don't actually know enough about what you're talking about to be talking about it. You're just doing what you're doing for appearance's sake, to appear like you care so much about the boxers, the same ones that have been getting screwed over long before Dana White and Zuffa came into it. They're not going to have a whole lot to say about that. Because running parallel to this story about the Revival Act is Floyd Mayweather's lawsuit against Showtime that cites Al Heyman as the architect of a scheme to steal all his money. And nobody in the boxing media seems to want to cover it, seems to want to talk about it, even though that should be the biggest story in boxing right now. You care so much about the boxers and the protections that the Ali Act provides them, but where were those protections for Floyd Mayweather's millions that are now gone? He's not going to get them back. That money is in the wind. Yeah, what do you think? Al Heyman stuffed it under his mattress? He spent that money already. It's gone. The only hope for Floyd is maybe he can get Showtime to pay him back what Al stole, which I don't think is likely. The point being, the Ali Act as it was, without any additions, without any changes, was not enough to protect Floyd Mayweather from being defrauded. The most successful, highest-earning boxer this sport has ever seen still got scammed. Ali Act and all. So maybe, just maybe, there's something seriously wrong with the existing framework, and an alternative is needed, because it can't really be any worse than what we've been seeing. But they don't want to talk about it.